Well, hello, Nury. Thank you so much for joining us. Omama will be joining us in a few minutes. Um, for the folks that are joining us, Nury Castillo Crawford runs a company called 1010 Publishing. And as a published author, I just think that so many people have this book waiting to be published. And sometimes it's very difficult to get the information you need in order to get published. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for having me, Josefina. I do, and it was pretty much the reason why for me to even go into a business for publishing and having a press company. I feel like there had to be something in between being self-published and going through a traditional huge conglomerate of a publishing house that is so hard to get. It's kind of like almost like when you do get in by, whether you have an attorney, a literary attorney, or an agent, it's almost like a miracle. And I feel like it shouldn't have to be, because as we know, books are our windows to the world, and I feel like everyone should have access to it. And the more books that are represented, not only for people in general, but also for experiences and ideas, etc., it helps us all grow. So I just felt like it was one of those reasons why I did it.
So when I wrote War, which I published in December, I was fortunate because I had been publishing a magazine for years. So I had the experience of putting a magazine together. And candidly, for me, it was very similar to that. But it was still a lot of work, but only because I was a little lazy. I was.
You have to be
I
disciplined,
Yeah,
definitely.
you have to be disciplined. So a lot of times what the process that I went through, and I want you to talk about the process that some of your authors go through. But my process was I did the chapters, who I was going to interview for each chapter, my story that I wove through it. And once I did that, I knew what I had to write about. Is that
So you
simple?
organized.
And I
Yeah,
did it in Google Drive.
okay. Yeah, a lot of authors use it now, because a lot of the technology is open for us now, where we can, have a collaboration and provide almost immediate feedback, because we have access to Google Drive and other type of platforms and programs. So yeah, we definitely do that, and having an end in mind definitely helps, right? So you know what, at the end of the day, what your message is going to be, what the context is going to be. And so if you start with the end in mind, I feel it does help writers create that flow and be able to put the beginning or the intro, and then going into the book. So definitely end in mind is good.
Let me introduce you to Omama, who's joining us right now. Hi, Omama. How are you?
Hi, sorry, had a little technical difficulties, but
No
how's it
worries.
going?
Thank you for joining us. This is Nury Castillo Crawford and her lovely son that I just saw a minute ago. So we were talking about the process of writing a book. As you know, when I wrote Roar, I was fortunate that I had the experience of putting a magazine together, which he has a copy of. But I could have really benefited from some guidance. There it goes. Some guidance. And I know a lot of authors, they have this idea, this story, they don't know where to go from there. And so Nury has a company called 1010 Publishing, where she helps authors put that book together. So if I have an idea, Nury, what do you recommend? What's my first step?
To write and get organized and disciplined. And I know that people usually see those posts, because since we're a small printing, small press, I definitely, relationships are very important to me. So for me, it's not the number of books that we can release. To me, it's like the quality and yeah, the quality of the books that we release. And so then we need to go ahead and I get them to write. And I tell them, like, you need to write, and then we will worry about the levels of editing later. We will worry about, you don't worry about the layout, you just write. That's your job. You just write, and we take care of everything else. And so, yeah, so that's what I tell authors, like, you need to be disciplined. And one of the reasons that we could probably publish more numbers. I mean, we're barely 2 years old, and everything we publish comes out in a bilingual format, period. So either we do it in dual language, or we have 2 books that are, you know, adult novel type things. So we do those in two different versions, an English version and another language. But for children's books, everything is in a bilingual format. But I tell them, like, you have to sit down and actually write your book and be disciplined. And if you can't do that, then I really can't help you. Like, that's the one thing you do have to do by yourself. And I help people by giving them tips and strategies, but you know, that definitely has to have some commitment. If you're not thinking about writing night and day, carrying your little notebook around, then it might not be the best thing for you at this time.
You know, so I have to tell you that years ago, I had this idea that a book that I wanted to write. And before I was writing, I was looking for an agent. To your point, I was obsessed with all these other aspects when what I needed to do was write. And when I finally sat down to write, then I was able to put it together. But you have to take the time, even if it's in here, guess what? It needs to get on the screen, or it needs to get on the paper, whatever your process is, you have to write it. But let's say you've written it, okay? You've written the book. What's the next step?
So for any genre, I feel like you need to have some friends that are not going to just want to, like, you know, pat you in the back. We need friends like that. Don't get me wrong. We all need a cheerleader in our life to tell us, you know, like, you're doing great. But we also need those critical conversations that I call them with friends that will tell you, like, what's going on. So personally, before you even, you know, pitch it to anybody else, you need to have some friends look at it, and people that, you know, like, I wouldn't give a children's book to someone that hates children's literature, right? I would try to give it to, like, for children's books, we try to have anywhere between 4 to 6 beta readers. And so we give it to children, a couple of children of that fit the age, and then we give it to some adults. And for children's books, a lot of the best adults are parents of those aged children and teachers of those aged children. And we have tons of those in the country. So that's never too hard to find. So definitely have somebody else read it. And then I will never stop saying it, that having a professional editor look at it before you pitch it is probably the best money that you can spend. And I hear a lot of chatter. I mean, especially on Twitter, people saying, like, you know, oh, editors are expensive, or I just edit it myself. And, you know, I'm not the arguing type, because people are going to do what they want to do, and I'm not going to judge them either. But that definitely is not the right answer. You need to have a professional editor look at it. That is the best money, in my opinion, that you're going to spend. That, and having another person, a couple of people read it, just to see what kind of feedback you get initially.
So the process that I took when I wrote Roar was, I did have an editor, because I had an editor that I had used with Color Magazine, and I knew how important it is, because as the writer, you often miss so many things. And candidly, I was tired of reading it. And I missed so many things. And so after I wrote it, I then sent the chapter to the editor, who I hired. It was the best money that I spent. And you can negotiate that. Always remember, you can negotiate that. So I got 2 different quotes, and the person that I knew, had the time to do it in the time frame that I wanted, and 2, was in my price point. then that's the person that edited the book.
Oh, definitely. I would say with like anything in life, you need to vet people and you need to get a few quotes. And all of this takes time. And this is all before you even try to pitch it to someone. I mean, so
Exactly.
again, either it's the right time for you and you are dedicated and you have a goal of getting published, or it really isn't, because it is going to take time and it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of discipline.
And to your point, it doesn't just happen. It's not happenstance. You have to give it time and effort in order to create something. With anything you do, you have to give it some time. You have to write, and then the editor. So I'm going through the steps in hoping that you can also talk about what offerings you have from 1010 Publishing. So once I gave it to the editor, I had to keep reading. And then I would send it back and she would read it again and edit, and I would read it again. And I mean, I was tired of reading the same thing. The good thing was when I finally gave up emotionally, let go of the book, that's when it started moving the fastest. And I was able to finish it within a few weeks, actually. Once I let it go.
And that is actually one of the hardest things for authors, because most people, most writers write about what's inside of them, their passion, their why, their journey, their inequities, etc., life journeys, etc. So when people are attached to their stories, and that makes it hard for people to let go. It makes it hard to accept or open up to critical feedback and criticism even. So I think that that's part of the process of becoming a writer and getting to the point where you understand that you're going to have to take it, whether it hurts. I mean, I tweet all the time, like, my editor hates me. Probably shouldn't be tweeting that, but I think she does sometimes. But so it's one of those things where people, writers just have to understand that that's part of the process. But you're absolutely right. The minute you let go of it, then you can make progress, because then you realize, like, hey, it's not personal. It's totally about the writing.
Plus, I think you have to trust the editor. You have to trust that this is what they do for a living. Just like people trust that what you do for a living is because you have knowledge to do it. And so when I started trusting her to do her job, then because initially it was like, no, 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 no. That needs to stay. That sentence, that word is so important for, no, it wasn't. Let it go. Yes. And once I did that, that editor, again, it went so smoothly after that.
Yeah, I would agree. Most people, when they reach that point where they're like, okay, maybe she does hate me or he hates me, but I'm going to just do it. Then, yeah, trust me, I'm actually in the process of writing a young adult novel, and I've been tweeting that the last couple of weeks, like, she hates me.
Yes, well, I think it was more I hated her than she hates me.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know if I hate her. I just feel like
I'm going to drop her. This is not working out for me. I'm done. I probably said that at least 5 times. And then again, I said, this is what she does for a living. Yes. You need to respect that I hired her for a reason. Let me give her the respect that she deserves.
Yeah, and having a good relationship with your editor does help. Yeah. So then even when you feel like they hate you, you can still keep going.
Exactly. And that's the beautiful thing about writing, is that you can have multiple relationships with people in the process of your book. So your friends, I didn't give it to too many friends of mine to read it, because it was, again, I was so connected to it and I was so emotional about it. But once I was able to let go, I was able to do that a little bit better. And then from the editing, what's the next step?
So there are a couple of different editing phases. So when we talk about editing, for me, it's more about, so if you've had a couple of people read it, because this is, you know, you're trying to just get an agent or an attorney to get into a publishing house, then to me, it's more about the proofreading, because you definitely don't want to send a sample of your writing filled with, I mean, not normal grammatical errors. I'm talking about terrible. Like I get sometimes, and I'm, you know, my managing editor usually takes care of that flush pile time process. But when I pick some of those up, I'm like, oh my gosh, like who skipped first through eighth grade? I don't understand. Like what's happening here? So it should never be that kind of reaction. I mean, everybody understands, you know, like there's here, you know, nobody's perfect until the editor gets it. So that's understandable. So once that proofreading part, that editing phase goes through, then I feel like you do need to find an agent to, you know, go ahead and then try to get into a publishing house. And I tell people all the time, it's like when you're looking at the traditional publishing houses and they like have, you know, accept 5,000 to 7,000 a year of manuscripts, then you have to be patient and you need to be aware that you're probably not going to get picked up by the first publishing house that you send it to, and then you might have to send it multiple times, and that they're most likely never going to reply to you. And some of them do. I mean, we do, but most of them don't, especially the huge ones. They don't reply, so don't get your feelings hurt. And here again, we go into the phase of, if you're going to be a writer and you really want to get published, you're going to have to get some thick skin, and you're not going to have to take things personal. Like things are not personal. These are people's jobs, and this is what people do. And so the next thing is getting an agent. The best way, in my opinion, to get an agent is through people that you already know. I think a lot of people find more success in securing an agent through word of mouth. And because otherwise, you, just like when you're looking for any other resource, you're going to have to do your research and find something. But I have seen a couple of them that to me are very open and are very open and are willing to give out their email and contact information, like on Twitter. I mean, I'm very surprised, because I think in the last 10 years, I think that number has definitely increased.
I think that writing is such a personal journey, and it's full of rejection as well. And you're so emotionally tied to the writings. I know when I was running Color Magazine, I had writers that were executives that would submit articles. And when I spoke with them about their articles, they were very emotional about it, which is very different. It's a very different, I think, profession than many others, because you're putting it out there and you're being judged or you're being questioned, and you're so intimate. These are the things that are happening in your head, and you're actually giving voice to them. And so you're emotional.
I would agree. I mean, we noted that a little earlier, that writing is very personal to people, because most of us write about our own journeys, our own thoughts, our own inequities, our own dreams, and then somehow turn them into a literary piece of work for others to see and for others to, you know, to judge. And so, yeah, throughout the whole process, things that I've learned about writing is that you should never write to become a billionaire or even a millionaire, and you shouldn't write if you can't take criticism, period, because you're going to get it, and you're almost definitely most likely not to become a millionaire or a billionaire from your writings. If people sometimes tell me that, like when I interview them, because I'm thinking about, you know, go ahead and collaborating with them and having them join our 1010 Publishing, then I tell them, like, one of the questions is, why do you want to be a published author? Like, tell me why you want to connect with us and why you want to join us. If they tell me that I'm ready to be a millionaire, people have actually told me that, and then I know they're not the right fit, because really being an author, it's like the number one thing that should come out of your mouth is like, I'm ready to work. Like I've dedicated time. This is a priority for me. and I'm ready to work like I've never worked before to make this happen, because I don't care what publishing house you go into, even the huge traditional ones, they're not going to spend millions or even thousands or even hundreds, I guess, at some point of money in marketing you unless you're some big name like Michelle Obama. Usually you're going to have to hustle and you're going to have to market your own. And people like literally kill me when they tell me like, well, why didn't the publishing house do that? I'm like, oh my gosh, if you just research for 10 minutes yourself, you will know that publishing houses are not going to do that for you necessarily. I mean, will they? Of course, from time to time, and I try to do that, but it's definitely a whole new layer and another new responsibility, and it's definitely a totally different job. You know, it's like an additional thing. So you have to be willing to go out there and work and make it happen, you know, and everything and everyone is 6 degrees of separation. And I always say, like, if you connect with people you know first, and then have them understand your passion and tell them that you're writing, and get your little, you know, your tribe, your cheerleading squad, whatever you want to call it, get them on board, because believe it or not, they can help you with their connections as well. And so to me, that's very important.
So let's say I've written a manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
What's my next step for you?
So for us, we take both literary agents, but it's not necessary, because I feel like, again, we're a small publishing house, and we have the manpower to read the manuscripts and provide feedback, because we don't get thousands. You know, this is our second year, and you know, that since we've launched, and we literally just probably get maybe 150 at the most last year. So we don't get thousands, nowhere near 1,000 even. And so it's a little easier for us to go through the manuscripts and read, you know, the samples or the excerpts that they send to us, and provide feedback or ask for more. So for us, when we have the requirements on our page on our website, so basically submit 1/3 of your, if it's a novel, and if it's a children's book, I want to say it's 10 pages. And you can send it through a PDF format. I think my assistant puts all that up, but I think that's what it's on there. So yeah, so not the whole, I always tell people, don't send your whole manuscript to anybody. I just don't think that's a safe thing. And I've heard horror stories of people like, oh my gosh, I sent it to so-and-so, and now my book is published on Amazon. Like, I've literally heard people say those sad stories, and I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So I always encourage people, like, don't do that, and don't send your stuff to anybody in its entirety until you are talking, you know, about an agreement or a contract. So yeah, so people can just check us out on www.1010 Publishing, and the requirements, and there people can, you don't need an agent, you can go through there, but you do need to go through an editor. I will say that, because the minute we see a lot of errors, we're not even going to bother. Yeah, nobody has time for that.
Nobody has time for that.
No.
No, I mean, that makes sense. Come on, you don't have to be. You have to be conscientious. You wouldn't turn something in that's not your best to anybody else. You shouldn't put it out the door. Now, I will tell you that, again, referencing when I worked at Color, there was one particular person that wrote this article, and her grammar was horrific, but the story was so potent, and it was so good. It actually gave me goosebumps when I read it. And I could not edit her work because it was just so bad. And I'm not a great editor. So I had to bring somebody in to do that for her, because I didn't want to take away her voice. So I was really like, it was difficult, because I couldn't change all the grammar that needed changing and fixing without losing out on that voice that she had. Do you ever find that?
Well,
not really.
Part of that story kind of makes me think like you already had a rapport with her, And so, you know, I don't know everybody that's submitting something, so I don't know what their passion is because I don't talk to them. So one of the other things that people have to submit along with their excerpt is a cover letter. And one of several, and I always share, is like your cover letter is your window of opportunity to let whoever is picking up your manuscript get a little bit of insight about you. So you need to like write that cover letter like this is your lifeline. So if you don't catch somebody's interest in that cover letter, you know, then they read your manuscript and then it's not even, then they're already criticizing it and like, what is this grammar stuff? Or what is, then you don't even have any leg to stand on. I feel like, let's say you didn't go through an editor to proofread it, which again, you should, but let's say you didn't, but your cover letter was like eye-catching and you could literally help the reader connect, then you have some kind of leeway here. Then maybe there's still hope because, you know, your cover letter caught somebody's attention.
So is a cover letter similar to what you write, cover letter for a job?
It tells, yeah, I would think so, because I think it tells a little bit about you, but it also tells a little bit about your why, and it tells a little bit about the genre of your book. And then for our cover letter, and again, we have the instructions on our page, but we also say like, what are you gonna do to help market this book?
Okay.
Because I think that's a misknown. I think literally, I think half of the feedback that we get from authors is them not knowing. So when we sign an author on, we actually have one meeting, and usually it's person to person, but not always, because some people are not here. We have some authors in other states, you know, California and Delaware, and et cetera. But most of the time we can, you know, meet up with them if it's not too far. And then we literally go through a marketing plan. So we give them a plan and we tell them like, these are the things that you need to be doing 12 months in, you know, before publishing, 6 months. Like we literally break it down and tell them like, you know, Goodreads, do this on there. Like we literally break it down for people because we want them to be successful, obviously. And we're going to do our part too, but we need the authors to take ownership and also go out there and try to and market, especially if you're not known, right? And nobody, you have to build a fan base before your book is released. And so we help them learn some strategies that have been proven to try to gather a fan base, and including like hashtags. We literally tell them like, these are the hashtags for your literary work. This is your genre. This is the context of your story, whatever. Boom. These are the hashtags you have to use. These are the things you have to do. So we literally spend a whole meeting just on marketing.
Oh, wow. I think that's so important.
It is.
Oh, Mama, do you have a book in you?
Yes, there's actually several books. So I was writing a short book called What the Financial, and it's just little tips in workbook that people could utilize regarding like finances. But during this whole coronavirus, there's another book that I'm in the works of, and so just getting research and interviewing people for this. So this is actually really awesome. And what's great is I don't usually hear a lot of women of color, A, being a publisher, B, like being like an author, but then C, giving steps to how to do this. So this is phenomenal. We do have a question from Victoria. She didn't put it in the Q&A, but she put it in the chat. So let me read it real quick. So Victoria said, I'm not a writer, but I do have a lot of writing for my job, directing a dance company. One of the biggest things I have to write is grant applications and letters of solicitation. Just this week, I've submitted 3. What do you think really sells people on an idea?
I think in any type of writing, I feel like it's your passion. You have to somehow convey your reason why you're doing something, because this is, and I've been on the other end of receiving scholarship letters and grant letters as well. And I can tell you that that sets people apart. You know, when people can read your words and it reflects a passion, and like you're doing it for something way above and beyond of what you can get out of it, or your organization, I think it helps connect people. But you also have to do a little research before you write grants, right? And I'm sure she knows. You have to learn what their in their what their goals are as an organization or as a company, and if it includes or aligns to your organization's goals as
Plus,
well.
plus I think, Victoria, when you're submitting grants or sponsorship requests, you have to make it easy for them to say yes to you. So if you're answering most of the questions that they have, then along with having a passion and a mission and why you're doing it and selling the person on that, you have to make it easy for them. Have all the information that they're going to need in order to make that decision. That's my thoughts on that. Do we have another question, Omama?
Yes. So Evelyn says, I actually was thinking the same question. So thank you, Evelyn, for posting it. How about authors whose books are already on Amazon? Is the independent route the best way?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, it depends, right? Depends on what your goal is as a writer and as publishing, having your book published. I think self-publishing definitely is a great option, and it's given a lot of writers the liberty and and being able to get a book published, and you know. But I think that you have to be serious about it. So whether you are self-publishing or you're going through a journey of getting published by a publishing house, you need, I don't know how many times I'm going to say it on this video, but you need to get an editor, because I think that is the number one mistake that people make when they self-publish. Now, if you have a book and it's not published by a publishing house or a press, and you have self-published, and then you want to go into a publishing, get published, then you're going to have to give I don't know if you've done your copyrights. Again, as a self-published author, you should have already done that, got your ISBN number and got copyrights of your work. You're going to have to hand all that over. And personally, I don't venture into that. And especially, I don't venture into that because I feel like it's extra work for us. I'm not saying I'll never do it. And then another request that we get is like, oh, my mom published a book, I'm sorry, in the Dominican Republic, but she passed away. So how can I get it published now? But I mean, you still have to get it released, right? And most contracts say that after X amount of years, if you haven't sold books, then the publishing house will release you, but you still got to go through the process of getting released, because nobody is going to sit here and try to get, republish or re-release your book and publish it through our company and then get into legalities. So a lot of those things, if you've done your self-publishing process right, then you have copyrights, and that's another, you're going to have to work on getting all of that stuff released before a publishing house takes you.
So number one, you have to write.
Yes.
Number two, you have to get an editor. Number three, you have to get an editor. Number four, you have to get an editor.
Yes.
So once you have the editor, you've done it, you submit, you have a great cover letter. You have the first meeting and you talk about how you're going to market, leverage their network, leverage their whatever social media places that they have, they can tap into. After you do that, I know for me, the cover was so important. Do you allow your authors to be involved with that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because we have to make sure that we've done our research on our end to see what sells. And let's just look at children's books. With children's books, illustrations at minimum are half the success of children's books. The children's book illustrations, including the book cover, literally can sell your book. I heard once someone say, you can have an amazing story and average or mediocre illustrations. Your children's book might never win an award. But if you have amazing illustrations and a mediocre story, your children's book could still win an award. Like it's likely that your children's book will win an award because illustrations tell half the story in a children's book. In any genre, book covers are very important because they separate your book from the thousands of books in Amazon, well, not so much Amazon, but in bookstores, etc. But even on Amazon, I've literally went on Amazon and just looked at books because I'm a nerd and I like books, and see some people, again, you self-published, good for you, but you didn't do your homework, and you took the first person that could give you a book cover for $50 when other people pay $500 for the book cover, and it shows. And so you have to do your homework, and you have to understand the impact of everything in a book, right? And book covers definitely can make or break you.
Now, for children's book, that's really interesting in terms of the illustration and the story. So if you're writing the story, you really need to get a fantastic illustrator that can tell the story for you.
Yeah, so if you're being self-published, then yes, do your homework, and there's tons of illustrators everywhere. But of course, if you are part of the publishing house, we take care of all of that.
So if I have a story, a children's story, and I submit it to 1010 Publishing through, you then assign an illustrator that you've already done work with.
Yeah, so like, yeah, again, authors write, that's all you do, right? I mean, if you're gonna self-publish, then you have a lot of different roles you're about to take on that you should take very seriously. But if you submit it to a publishing house, then they do all of the work. I mean, that's what we're here for. We will take care of every step of the way, and we do. Like when we have a draft of the cover, we will send it to the author and say, hey, I'm so excited, we have a draft, and we show it to them, right? Now, I think maybe once somebody said something like, oh, I thought, maybe the little boy could have curly hair or something. And I'm like, okay, it's not a huge thing. So I can definitely take input and be like, okay, let's see curly hair. Let's try it. So little things like that, of course, but most of the time people are just so excited and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So it's beautiful. So we don't have too many issues with that, but yeah, we do share. And then when it's final, we share it with them. And I literally have one author that her book's coming out at the end of this year, and we sent her the book cover and a promo kit, which is, I don't know if you know what a promo kit is, but it's like the flyer.
But for everybody else.
Yeah, the flyer, and then the book cover, and then info about the book, maybe sometimes a little bit about the author, and definitely we always include the ISBN number on there, and little tidbits of info, not too much, but kind of like a 411 on the book at hand. So yeah, so we do create like their first promo kit and send it to them, and that way they can look at it and go ahead and start sharing it as well.
Mama, anything you want to add?
So I have two questions. This is like awesome, and now I know who to reach out to, like when I'm ready to make some moves with the book. You mentioned briefly about, so if someone passed away and someone wanted to submit like someone else's story, right? So is that, are you allowed to do that? Like I see a lot of biographies and whatnot. But then B, if someone wrote a story and they passed away and you're now publishing their story, like, how does that play it, I guess, into like someone's estate or all the legal aspects of things? That's what I'm just curious about. The legality of publishing someone else's story in their words.
Yeah, so I'm not an attorney, and I would definitely consult with my attorney at that point. But I'm thinking that we definitely would have to have some kind of release, right? So, like, let's say just something, you know, drawn out by our attorneys that basically, like, if ever something happened and you weren't supposed to give us the story, then it's your fault and you're going to take the blame for it. I mean, that's just in layman's terms, you know, obviously, I'm sure there's legal terms for all that, but from my end, my point, my scope, that's what I would want. That's pretty much what I would tell my attorney. Like, I don't care. I mean, I like the story, but make sure you write it up where something happens and people, you know, this becomes the bestseller or something and people want money for it, that it's not us. Like, they can take it up with her or him, whoever.
So Nury, let me ask you this. In terms of, you know, the new state of normal, right? I typically don't buy books anymore. I don't, although I've always loved books. I had this idea when I was younger that I would have this huge library full of books. That was like my dream. And there was this, I think it was Hitchcock. He had this one storyline where this guy is trying to read, and there's this huge thing that happened and everybody is gone. So he's kind of hunkered down reading in the basement, and he comes out, right? And everybody's gone, and the only thing standing is the library. Right? So he's so happy, and he's running up the stairs to the library, and his glasses fall, and he steps on them. That was the story. But I always think, I love books like you. I love the smell of them. But now I get Audible, and I get a lot of digital books because it's easier for me. Those ebooks are a lot easier. What do you do in terms of publishing the physical book, and what do you do in terms of the digital ones?
So we don't do any digital ones right now because they're super easy to do, actually, to be honest with you, because you already have it all laid out and everything. I love printed books, and I guess I'm going to do what I love. So I'm going to stick to those. And there's been a rise. I mean, recent years, I was looking at the data, and there's been a slight rise on the purchasing of printed books again. But that's why it's so important for our authors to get connected with people, because the one variable that we can have with readers or potential readers is making connections with them. Because out of the thousands and thousands of books, and even look at children's books, why would I pick your book over anybody else's books, right? People are more apt to share my book, invite me to their schools, because they've gotten to know me, they follow me on social media, they're like, oh, she gives tips on how to support kids, or, you know, she was an immigrant and her books are about a little immigrant girl, and, you know, I have those kids in class, or my family is immigrants, or whatever. I mean, making connections, connecting with people, showing your vulnerability, your journey, your passion, your why. I think that's important. And believe it or not, I feel like that is one of the best strategies that we can implement, is because people are not going to go out and buy a $14.99 book when they can get it for 99 cents on Audible.
Right. So let me, before we answer, I think we have one or two questions. Before we answer those, just to reiterate what we talked about, the writing, the editing. Again, I'm going to say editing again and editing again. The marketing is very important. And I love what you just said about the personal connection, because I am more, although I do like the digital books, I am more apt to buy books that I have either met the writer, or there's a journey that resonates with me, or the storyline. And so, you know, the coffee shops or the bookstores, you know, they still work, the personal connection. And I'm gonna open it up to Omama for the questions. And Omama, your screen keeps moving all over the place.
Sorry.
It's making me a little dizzy.
Sorry. um, so I like hard books as well too. And I used to buy books all the time, and I stopped just because I like supporting small businesses, and there's not a lot of small bookshops anymore, and I don't support Amazon. Um, so the nearest bookstore to me is Barnes and Nobles, which is fine, but I'm trying to support the little people, so I get it. So this question is from Evelyn, and it's not a silly question. But she said, I'm not an author, but how do books end up in the library?
How do books end up in what?
In the library.
Well, that's your ISBN number is a number that you have to register your book. And again, your publishing house will do that for you. But if you're
So it's basically
self-published,
the copyright.
yeah. And if you publish through Amazon or another platform such as Amazon, there are other ones that you can. They will, I'm 99% sure that they will do that for you as well. So there's a couple of ways that your book will get in a library. Definitely if it's popular and people are talking about it and you know, it's been on the news or whatever, some kind of media platform. But also if people request it, right? I've literally, you know, had people say, yeah, my public library didn't have the books because the two that are out is part of a series. So the first two are out. They're like, you know, they didn't have the books, but I requested it, so now we have it. So definitely that's a way, either at your school, children's school library or at the public library. That's how a lot of books get in there because people start requesting it. And sometimes libraries, if it's, you know, if it's a whole group of a library system, like in your county or whatever, sometimes they'll share it. But again, if more people keep requesting it, then they're like, okay, we'll need to get our own copies or whatever. That's how they'll
Now,
do it.
isn't it true too, Nury, that the same thing works at the bookstores?
Oh,
So,
definitely.
you know,
Yes.
you have small bookstores and they can only carry X amount because of their space, right?
Yes.
But if you go in and you either heard of the book, it was in social media, whatever, the author resonates with you. If you go to the bookstore and you request the book, now what do they need to know? The author's name, the
The
title,
ISBN number.
the ISBN number. And if they don't know that, because, you know, maybe I just heard about it, you know, I was walking my dog and I don't have a dog, but if I were walking my dog,
Yeah.
you know.
Title and author. I think title and author definitely helps. And if you are an author and you want your book in a specific bookstore, you can always go and offer to do a book reading and do it for free. Those, to me, those are great as well. And then they automatically at least buy one copy. But of course, bookstores usually carry more. Like the smallest number I've ever had a bookstore offer was 30. They'll say, okay, come, okay, perfect, come, and then I'll come, and then they'll buy 30 books. And if they're small bookstores like these indie, which I love them, we have one here in Atlanta that's like women-owned, women-based, and all the authors that they carry are women.
I
So
love
it's a very,
that.
it's very feminine, pro-feminine type. And they're really small, so they basically said we'll buy 10 and we'll carry like 10 more. And so you kind of have to be open, you know. And when we're talking about bookstores, I feel like be flexible, be open. You just never know what kind of connections you make out of those too. So it's definitely again, relationships. And so yeah, so that's definitely another way to get your book is offer a free book service, book reading, and do an author visit at the bookstore. And a lot of bookstores are very open to that.
Mama, did we have another question?
It was just Evelyn saying it was a silly question. That's why I said it wasn't a silly question.
Okay. So just getting back to what we were talking about, Nury, one question: if you self-publish, and you now want to go a different route, you want to work with a publishing house, what are your recommendations for those type of authors?
Just make sure that you have like all of your, you have, because everything is going to have to get like re-released. So just make sure that you understand that when you have self-published, you own all of the rights to your material, to your work. If you sell one book, if you're selling it like on Amazon, I think you get like 60% or something of it. I mean, you just have to know that there's a difference, right? So when you go and you're going through a publishing house, you have to understand that you're literally saying, I am entrusting you with my baby, and do what you need to do to it, and I will sit back, which is hard. I'll sit back and let you do what you do, and then move forward. But I think that's a hard transition for a lot of people, because I think it's a hard concept for people in general. A lot of authors want to be very involved, and that's not their job. Your job is to write. So, I think the smaller you go in terms of publishing houses, I think the more attention you'll get, and people will be a little bit more apt to understand, like walk you through it, and like, it's okay. And, do you like this, or, whatever. But most of the time it's not, the bigger you go, then the less time people have to talk to you and talk you through it. They'll just remind you, paragraph 4 in your contract, leave us alone and let us do our job.
That's right, but it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, although I do understand the whole connection, the emotional connection.
Me too.
I do, but you're right. You have to trust that the company that you're working with is going to be the one. This is what they do every day for a living. They have the knowledge base, so you have to trust them. So
and also get an attorney, right, before you sign anything. We tell people that, even though it's, us, we say, make sure you have your attorney review the agreement before signing. And I think they don't, because we get it back really quick. And I'm like,
well, they're so excited.
I know they are, and I'm excited for them too. But I'm like, okay, I told you to have it. But of course, we're not in the business of doing anything wrong with authors. We love authors, we love writers, because I am one too, and I've been through all the emotions that every writer has gone through as well. So I feel like that's another difference. Is not only do I want to have relationships with our authors, it's like I'm there too, because I went through that journey before deciding to launch my own publishing house. I went through all of that, right, and went through the contract stage, et cetera, et cetera. So I get it. It is a personal thing, and as it should be. That's why we write, because we have something to say. It's personal.
So as you think about your journey as an entrepreneur, what would you say are your feelings regarding if you were to do it again? Would you?
Yeah, I would. I would, and I think that if I were to start all over again, I think that I think that finding amazing help, because good is never good enough for me, takes time. And I think in the beginning, I was really hard on myself. Like, oh my gosh, I interviewed that person, and like, it just didn't go as like I wanted it to. And they were great people. They were okay people. No, they weren't great. They were okay people. But I need great people. I want people because we're dealing with people's lives here. And to me it is, because these people are so connected to their writing. And that I think that if I had to do it again, I would definitely get somebody like an agency to help me secure the right candidates, so I don't spend so much time vetting them myself.
So talent. Well,
Yes.
Nury, thank you so much. Again, I'm going to iterate it, because I think it's so important. I know I struggled with this. You have to write in order to get published.
Yes, right. That is
you have to
one.
write. Don't worry about the agent. Don't worry about the publishing house. You have to get the writing. One question I didn't ask you is, do you have to have a finished manuscript, or can I send you the first 3 chapters, or whatever your guidelines are? Do I have to have it finished, or can I do the first 6?
Yeah, so we don't ask for the full. We ask for like about a third, so it doesn't have to be the full manuscript. We just need to see where you are and where you're going with it.
Okay, super.
And so it depends. So then at that point, because one of our first meeting is about the marketing, and then subsequent meetings one of them will talk about a timeline and where you are. And so based on that, we adjust timeframes, because all of our authors get a monthly email, like updates, and they're specialized, like, hey, this is where we are with you. This is what we're doing. This is what you should be doing, including on your social media, et cetera. Like, these are steps. This is what you do. This is what we're doing. And X amount of days total, we're supposed to be slated to release. And we don't usually have a specific date until probably like 3 to 4 months out, when we've already going through the editing and all that. So now we're like, okay, now we got a good sense. We have the manuscript is ready. It's been, gone through like the developmental editing, and now maybe it's going through the copy editing or something, or the proofreading. So once we're in the editing phase, then we can solidify a date of actual release. And then we can help our authors find ways to market, have your release party. We're going to get you, like for our authors, we tell them we're going to give them at least 2 opportunities to present or do a visit or something. We help them secure at least 2. And so that's important for us, because we want to still help them find an outlet of being able to share their story. But they have to do work too, but we do try to help them.
Now, how about if you have somebody that doesn't want to work with their name, they want to have a pen name?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
But then they're not leveraging their networks. For example, I want to write a dark story.
Yeah.
I already started, but I do not want it to be associated with my name.
With you. Yeah, so then on your cover letter, you have to you just have to write down how are you going to help market it then. If it's not through the relationships that you have, then what is the plan, right? What is the plan of you marketing yourself? Because, that's probably like one of the, especially if you're not like a celebrity, you're not nationally known, then we need to have a plan. We just can't go into it blindsided and pray that somebody's going to buy a book. We need to have a plan on how we're going to get the word out about the book and how we're going to connect with people.
Okay. Well, Nury, thank you so much. You're going to be getting something from me.
Okay.
Did you hear
that? Awesome.
And I'm sure from Mama. Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll follow up with you, Nury, at a later time. But this was incredibly helpful.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to. The coronavirus has given me some free time, to be honest with you.
Yes,
so that's a good thing.
No, we are going to go ahead and post this on YouTube, and I'm hoping that's going to be done either tomorrow or by.
Perfect. I'll share it on my networks as well.
Oh, Mama, did you have something?
Sorry, real quick. Nury, this was awesome. This was actually really, really helpful. And now I know a plug. Would you be able to also share that bookstore that's women owned and for women authors as well too? I think that'd be really, really cool to get to know where they're at as well.
Yeah.
So.
Nury, a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for moderating. And I see a question up. We have.
It just says thank you.
Okay, thank you. Super.
Yeah. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll talk soon.
Bye.